You are no longer welcome at the Hartwell family dinner this Sunday. I've made reservations at Maison instead." Victoria Hartwell's words cut through the phone line like a chef's knife through butter, her voice dripping with the same smug superiority she'd perfected over the 7 years I'd been married to her son. I gripped my phone tighter, watching my knuckles turn white as she continued. "It's time we dine somewhere that reflects our family's standards, somewhere exclusive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The irony of her statement hung in the air like the aroma of a perfectly reduced sauce, rich, complex, and in this case, absolutely delicious. Because Victoria had no idea that I, Amara Chen, was the owner and executive chef of Maison, the very restaurant she'd chosen to exclude me from. I took a slow, measured breath, the kind I'd practiced in culinary school when learning to perfect, a soufflé, steady and controlled. "I see," was all I said, my voice betraying none of the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. Victoria had been trying to separate me from her precious son Daniel since the day we met, and now she thought she'd finally found the perfect way to cut me out of the family portrait. "I'm glad you understand," Victoria replied, the satisfaction evident in her tone. "Daniel will meet us there at 7. He's been under so much stress with the family business lately. A refined evening without distractions is exactly what he needs." The pause before distractions told me everything I needed to know about where I ranked in her estimation. As I ended the call, I didn't feel the sting of rejection I might have years ago. Instead, a plan was already forming in my mind, simmering, like a perfect stock that had been building flavor for years. Victoria Hartwell was about to learn what happens when you ban a chef from dinner at her own restaurant. My journey to owning Maison had been as carefully guarded as my grandmother's secret recipes. Not even Daniel knew the full extent of my involvement. He believed I was merely a consultant for the owner, a convenient explanation for my irregular hours and intimate knowledge of the restaurant's operation. The truth was far more complicated, much like the relationship between a mother-in-law and the woman she deemed unworthy of her son. I stood in the center of my kitchen at home, the one place Victoria had never been able to criticize after, tasting my food, and smiled for the first time since receiving her call. Sunday dinner was 3 days away, plenty of time to prepare a service that the Hartwell family would never forget. The first time I met Victoria Hartwell, she greeted me with a firm handshake and an appraising look that catalogued every detail of my appearance, from my practical shoes to my lack of designer accessories. We were at an upscale charity gala where I'd been hired to create the menu, though she had no way of knowing that. To her, I was simply the woman her son had impulsively invited to be his date after meeting me just 2 weeks earlier. "So, Amanda, Daniel tells me you work in food service?" she said, deliberately using the wrong name and reducing my career to its most dismissive description. "It's Amara," I corrected her gently. "And yes, I'm a chef." I didn't elaborate on my training at the Culinary Institute of America or my years working under Michelin-starred masters in kitchens across Europe and Asia. I'd learned early in life that people who needed to be impressed rarely were worth impressing. "How quaint," Victoria replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "The Hartwells have always appreciated good food. We've been patrons of Chef Antoine at Le Ciel for nearly 20 years. I don't suppose you're familiar with his work?" I was more than familiar with Antoine. He'd been 2 years behind me at culinary school and had once confessed, after too many drinks at an industry event, that he'd built his signature sauce from a base he'd learned from watching me. But that wasn't information Victoria needed. "I've heard he's very talented," I said instead, watching Daniel's discomfort grow beside me. This was clearly a familiar pattern. Victoria establishing dominance, Daniel caught in the middle. "Mother, Amara is being modest," Daniel finally interjected. "The dinner we're eating tonight? She designed the entire menu." Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrow rose fractionally, the only indication that she was surprised. Is that so? Well, I suppose we'll see if it meets expectations. That night, as the guests raved about the innovative menu that balanced traditional techniques with unexpected flavor combinations, Victoria maintained a studied neutrality. She offered no compliments, found no faults, but watched with calculating eyes as prominent members of Seattle society praised the anonymous chef who had created the memorable meal. Later, when Daniel and I began dating seriously, Victoria's resistance to our relationship manifested in 1,000 subtle ways. There were the dinner invitations extended to Daniel alone, the family recipes she insisted on teaching him rather than me, despite my professional expertise, the casual remarks about other women from suitable backgrounds who were still available, if he'd only consider them. When Daniel proposed after a year of dating, Victoria's resistance became less subtle. "She's not Hartwell material," I overheard her telling him the night we announced our engagement at the family dinner. "She works in a kitchen, Daniel. What will people say? What about the legacy your father built?" Daniel had stood his ground. That night, one of the few times he directly opposed his mother. "I love her, Mother. That should be enough." But it was never enough for Victoria. Even after our wedding, a compromise affair that was smaller than I wanted and less grandiose than Victoria demanded, she continued her campaign of subtle undermining. She scheduled family meetings during times I was working. She referred to my career as Amara's little cooking job. She expressed frequent concern about when we would start a family, always with the implication that my career was an indulgent hobby that should be set aside for more important matters. Meanwhile, what Victoria didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that my little cooking job had evolved into something far more significant. The years of working 80-hour weeks in other people's kitchens, saving every penny, building relationships with suppliers and investors, had culminated in an opportunity I couldn't refuse. Maison had been struggling under its original owner, a talented chef with no business acumen. I was initially brought in as a consultant to revamp the menu, but soon discovered deeper problems. When the owner decided to sell, I was ready. With my savings and a group of silent investors who believed in my vision, I purchased the restaurant, but made a strategic decision to remain behind the scenes. I hired a charismatic executive chef to be the public face while I controlled the menu, the operations, and the business direction. This arrangement allowed me the creative freedom I craved without the public scrutiny that often falls on visible female chefs. It also protected me from Victoria's inevitable attempts to diminish my achievement. For 3 years, I transformed Maison from a struggling eatery to the most sought-after reservation in Seattle. Critics raved about the mysterious culinary genius behind the restaurant's renaissance. Local and national awards followed. And through it all, I maintained my cover, working as a private chef and consultant as far as the outside world, and my mother-in-law knew. Daniel knew I was involved with Maison but believed I was simply a valued consultant. This wasn't a deliberate deception of my husband as much as a gradual omission. In the early days, I hadn't told him about my ownership because I wasn't sure the restaurant would succeed. Later, as Maison became more prominent, I found myself enjoying having one area of my life that was entirely my own, free from Victoria's judgments and Daniel's well-meaning but often stifling protection. The greater Maison's success became, the more Victoria talked about it in my presence, always as an example of the kind of appropriate establishment the Hartwells patronized, always with the subtle implication that it represented a world beyond my reach. "Chef Julian's tasting menu is simply transcendent," she would say during family dinners, referring to my public-facing executive chef. "The way he balances tradition and innovation reminds me of our family values, honoring the past while embracing the future." The irony of her praising my food philosophy while dismissing me never failed to amuse me privately. Daniel's family business, Hartwell Properties, a commercial real estate development company his grandfather had founded, had been struggling in recent years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria, who had taken control after her husband's death a decade earlier, had made a series of questionable investments that were only now becoming public knowledge. Daniel, as COO, was increasingly bearing the burden of managing both the business challenges and his mother's reputation among Seattle's elite. I had watched my husband grow more stressed and distant over the past 6 months as the company's problems mounted. Victoria, predictably, blamed me for not providing the supportive home environment Daniel needed during this difficult time. The fact that I was often working during family crisis meetings was, in her mind, further evidence of my inadequacy as a Hartwell wife. What Victoria didn't know, what Daniel himself didn't fully comprehend, was that Maison's success had put me in a financial position to potentially help the Hartwell company weather its current crisis. I had been quietly consulting with my financial advisors about the possibility of becoming an investor in my husband's family business. Not because I craved Victoria's approval, but because I loved Daniel and wanted to protect what was important to him. But before I could propose this solution, Victoria had made her move, banning me from the family dinner and selecting my own restaurant as the venue for my exclusion. As I began to plan my response to Victoria's power play, my phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. "Amara," he began, his voice tense with the familiar tone of apology I'd come to recognize whenever he was caught between me and his mother. "About Sunday dinner. Your mother already called me," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "She made it very clear that I'm not invited," Daniel sighed, the sound of a man who had spent a lifetime trying to navigate the turbulent waters of Victoria Hartwell's expectations. "It's not what you think. She's invited some potential investors to join us, very traditional people who expect a certain kind of family dynamic. And I don't fit that dynamic," I finished for him. "It's just one dinner," Daniel said, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "Things are really precarious with the company, right now. Mother thinks these investors might be our last hope to avoid selling controlling interest." I felt a familiar pressure building behind my eyes, the beginning of the headache that always accompanied these conversations. "And you? What do you think, Daniel?" There was a pause, too long to be reassuring. I think we need these investors, and if that means playing by Mother's rules for one evening, maybe it's worth it." 7 years of marriage, and still he couldn't stand against Victoria's will. 7 years, and I was still the outsider who needed to be hidden away when important family matters were at stake. "I understand," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. And I did understand, more than Daniel knew. I understood that Victoria would never see me as worthy. I understood that Daniel would always be caught in the middle. And I understood, with perfect clarity, that Sunday dinner at Maison was going to change everything. "Thank you," Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. "I promise I'll make it up to you." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen counter and opened my laptop. A few clicks brought up Maison's reservation system, where I could see that Victoria had indeed booked a table for 7 people at 7 p.m. on Sunday. The note indicated it was for Hartwell family and special guests. Victoria had chosen my restaurant because it had become the symbol of exclusivity and refinement in Seattle's dining scene. The 3-month waiting list for reservations was bypassed, only for the city's most elite names, of which Hartwell was still one, despite the company's financial troubles. Victoria likely thought she was demonstrating her family's continuing social prominence by securing a coveted Sunday table. What she could not have known was that Sunday was typically my night in the kitchen, while Chef Julian, handsome, charming, and an excellent executor of my culinary vision, was the face diners recognized. Sunday was when I allowed myself the pleasure of cooking. We called these executive chef's whim nights, where lucky diners received special dishes not on the Regular menu. Food critics had written breathless reviews speculating about the identity of the Sunday chef, whose creations somehow elevated Maison's already stellar offerings to sublime heights. I picked up my phone and called Julian. "We need to talk about Sunday's service," I said when he answered. "I'm going to need something special for the Hartwell party." "Your mother-in-law again?" Julian asked with a knowing tone. He was one of the few people who knew the full truth about my ownership and my relationship with Victoria. "She's bringing potential investors to save the family business," I explained, "and she's specifically uninvited me from attending." Julian's low whistle carried through the phone. "So the dragon lady doesn't want you at dinner, but she's having it at your restaurant? What's the word I'm looking for? Poetic?" I suggested. "Ironic? An opportunity?" I was thinking more like a recipe for disaster. But I like your optimism. Julian paused. "What are you planning, Amara?" I considered the question carefully. Despite the hurt and anger Victoria's latest exclusion had triggered, I didn't want revenge. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was recognition. Not just of my culinary skills, but of my worth as a person, as Daniel's wife, as a member of the family Victoria had worked so hard to keep me separate from. "I'm planning to serve them the best meal of their lives," I said finally. "And then, I'm going to tell them the truth." After ending the call with Julian, I began to sketch out the menu for Sunday night. It would tell my story through food, my Chinese-American heritage, my classical training, my personal journey. Each course would reveal another piece of who I was, building to the final revelation that the chef Victoria had been praising for years. The culinary genius behind Maison's success was the very woman she deemed unworthy of her family. As I worked, a notification from our home security system pinged on my phone. The front door had been opened. Moments later, Daniel walked into the kitchen, his tie loosened, his expression weary. "You're home early," I said, surprised. Daniel typically worked until 8 or 9 these days, trying to untangle the financial mess Victoria's leadership had created. "I needed to see you," he said, setting his briefcase down and coming to stand beside me at the counter. His eyes fell on my menu notes. "Working on something new?" I closed my notebook. "Just ideas. How bad is it, Daniel? The company situation." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen more frequently as the business troubles mounted. "Worse than I've let on. Mother made some high-risk investments that aren't paying off. We're overextended on several properties. These investors she's meeting on Sunday. They're our last good option before we have to consider selling to Meridian Group." Meridian was the Hartwell's chief rival, a newer, more aggressive development company that had been trying to acquire Hartwell properties for years. Victoria would consider selling to them a personal failure of catastrophic proportions. "And she thinks excluding me from dinner will help secure the investment?" I asked. Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable. "The Chens are very traditional. Old Singapore money. Mother thinks they'll respond better to a family that doesn't include a chef for a daughter-in-law," I finished for him. "I'm sorry, Amara. You know I don't agree with her, but right now, with everything that's at stake..." I placed my hand over his. "It's okay. I understand." And despite the hurt, I did understand. Daniel had been raised to believe that preserving the family business was his primary responsibility. Victoria had spent a lifetime reinforcing that. The Hartwell legacy came before personal concerns. "I'll make it up to you," he promised again, bringing my hand to his lips. "After this investment comes through, after the company is stabilized, things will be different. I'll make Mother understand that you're an essential part of this family." I had heard variations of this promise throughout our marriage. Daniel always believed that the next success, the next milestone, the next family gathering would be the one where Victoria finally accepted me. His optimism was both endearing and heartbreaking. "I know you will," I said, not wanting to argue. Sunday would speak for itself. As Daniel went upstairs to change, I returned to my menu planning with renewed purpose. Sunday's dinner would not just be a revelation of my identity as Maison's owner and chef. It would be a declaration of my value, not just to Victoria, but to Daniel as well. For too long, I had allowed my accomplishments to remain in the shadows. For too long, I had accepted Victoria's judgment that I was somehow less than worthy of the Hartwell name. For too long, I had waited for Daniel to stand up for me in ways that mattered. Sunday dinner at Maison would change everything, not because I would be seeking revenge against Victoria, but because I would finally be claiming my rightful place, at the table. As I finalized the menu, I felt a sense of calm determination replace the hurt and anger that had initially fueled my planning. Victoria Hartwell had banned me from family dinner at my own restaurant. By Sunday night, she would understand exactly what that meant. For her, for Daniel, for the future of the family she had tried so hard to shield from my influence. The stage was set. The ingredients were chosen. And I, Amara Chen Hartwell, executive chef and owner of the most exclusive restaurant in Seattle, was about to serve the most important meal of my career to the woman who thought she could keep me away from her table. The morning after Victoria's call, I arrived at Maison before sunrise. The restaurant was silent, bathed in the soft blue light that preceded dawn, my favorite time to be in the kitchen. Before the staff arrived, before the day's demands began, I could think clearly and create freely. I moved through the immaculate space, running my hands over the countertops I'd selected, the custom ranges I'd commissioned, the knife rack holding my personal collection of Japanese steel. This kitchen had been my first priority when renovating Maison. While the dining room boasted restored crown molding and hand-painted murals depicting the food markets of the world, the kitchen was a temple to modern efficiency with touches of traditional craftsmanship. It told my story better than words ever could. The blending of heritage and innovation, respect for tradition with an eye toward the future. I pulled my notebook from my bag and spread it on the central island, reviewing the menu I'd drafted the night before. Each course would reveal another layer of who I was, both to the investors Victoria was courting and to my husband, who had never fully seen the scope of my ambition or the depth of my success. Starting the day with grand plans, I looked, up to find Wei, my sous chef, standing in the doorway. At 63, Wei had worked in some of the finest kitchens across Asia and Europe before joining me at Maison. He could have been an executive chef many times over, but as he once told me, I prefer to be the right hand rather than the face. There's more honesty in it. Not just plans, I said, pushing the notebook toward him. Sunday's special menu for the Hartwell party. We studied the pages, his expression betraying nothing until he reached the final course. Then his eyebrows rose slightly, the equivalent of a shocked gasp from anyone else. You're going to reveal yourself? After 3 years of anonymity? His eyes met mine. Because your mother-in-law excluded you from dinner? Because it's time, I corrected, though even I wasn't sure if this was truth or rationalization. I've hidden in this kitchen long enough, letting Julian take the acclaim while I do the work. Wei folded his arms across his chest. You designed it that way. You said it gave you freedom. It did. It does. I turned away, beginning to pull ingredients for morning prep. But things are changing. Daniel's family business is in trouble. I could help, but Victoria would rather exclude me than admit I have value beyond being her son's wife. Ah, Wei said, the single syllable weighted with understanding. So this is about respect. Isn't everything in a kitchen about respect? I countered, falling into our familiar pattern of philosophical debate. Wei smiled slightly. In a kitchen, respect is earned through skill and proven daily through consistency. In families, I've found it more complicated. I chopped ginger with more force than necessary. In the Hartwell family, respect is determined by bloodline and bank account, neither of which I have. Yet you own the most exclusive restaurant in Seattle, Wei pointed out. The irony would make a good opera, or a terrible family dinner. I set down my knife. The Sunday menu will need your special touch with the XO sauce for the third course, Chew. Nodded, accepting both the technical request and my desire to change the subject. I'll start the prep today. The dried scallops need time to develop proper depth. We worked in companionable silence as morning light gradually filled the kitchen. The rhythm of chopping, the hiss of the gas burners, the precise movements of preparation. This was the meditation that had centered me since culinary school. Here, in this world of sensory clarity, the complicated dynamics of the Hartwell family seemed distant and almost trivial. By the time Julian arrived at 9, the day's prep was well underway, and I had regained my emotional equilibrium. Julian, tall, Nordic, with the kind of telegenic good looks that made him perfect for the public-facing role of executive chef, whistled appreciatively as he reviewed the Sunday menu. "You're not holding back, are you?" he said, eyebrow raised at the complexity of the dishes. The consommé alone would give most chefs nightmares. "It needs to be perfect," I said simply. Julian's expression softened. "It will be. We've got your back on this, Amara." His easy support reminded me why I'd hired him 3 years ago. Beyond his solid culinary skills and camera-ready charm, Julian possessed something rarer, genuine security in his own worth. He had never resented playing frontman to my behind-the-scenes genius. As he once put it, "I get the applause and the comfortable hours. You get the creative control and the headaches of ownership. Seems fair to me." "We should gather the full team this afternoon," I decided. "Everyone needs to understand what's at stake on Sunday." Julian nodded. "I'll arrange it for 4, after lunch service. Should I bring in extra hands for the night?" "No," I said firmly. "Just our core team. People we trust absolutely." The truth about Maison's ownership wasn't widely known, but it wasn't exactly a state secret either. Most of the core kitchen staff and long-term servers knew I was more than a consultant. Still, we maintained the public fiction carefully, allowing food critics and diners to speculate about the mysterious culinary force behind Julian's success. By late afternoon, the kitchen was spotless again after lunch service, and my core team gathered around the central island. Besides Wei and Julian, there was Fatima, my pastry chef whose architectural desserts had their own following, Thomas and Layla, senior line cooks who had been with me since opening day, and Sophia, my dining room manager whose perfect memory for customer preferences had helped build Maison's reputation for personalized service. "Sunday's service will be different," I began without preamble. "Table 7 at 7 o'clock will be the Hartwell party. My mother-in-law, my husband, his sister, and potential investors for their family business." "The dragon lady is gracing us with her presence again," Thomas muttered, earning him a tui elbow from Layla. I allowed myself a small smile. Victoria's visits to Maison were infrequent but memorable, her exacting standards and condescending manner leaving an impression on the staff. "What Thomas means to say," Sophia interjected smoothly, "is that we'll ensure Mrs. Hartwell receives our usual impeccable service." "Better than usual," I corrected, "because she doesn't know I own Maison. She thinks I'm merely a consultant here, and she has specifically uninvited me from this family dinner." A moment of stunned silence followed this revelation. She banned. "You from dinner at your own restaurant?" Fatima asked finally, her Australian accent making the question sound even more incredulous. "She did. And on Sunday, after they've experienced the special tasting menu I've designed, I'm going to reveal the truth." I outlined the menu, explaining how each course would tell part of my story, from my Chinese-American heritage to my classical training to my personal culinary philosophy. The final course would be served by me personally, ending the charade of my behind-the-scenes role. "This isn't just about surprising my mother-in-law," I concluded. "It's about claiming my place, both in this restaurant and in my marriage. I've allowed Victoria to diminish me for years. I've hidden my success to keep the peace. That ends Sunday night. The team exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and concern evident in their expressions. Well, Julian said finally, breaking the tension. I've always said you deserve the spotlight more than I do. Sunday sounds like the perfect time for a changing of the guard. His easy support lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. One by one, the others voiced their commitment to making Sunday's revelation a success. The dragon lady won't know what hit her, Thomas declared, earning genuine laughter this time. As the team dispersed to their stations, Sophia lingered behind. There's something else you should know, she said quietly. Victoria called again. This morning to update her reservation. She's requested Chef Julian personally attend to their table. She mentioned her son greatly admires his work. The irony was almost too perfect. Victoria had no idea that the culinary genius she praised so effusively to diminish me was, in fact, me all along. Did she now? I felt a strange calm settle over. Let's make sure Chef Julian gives them his complete attention then. When I arrived home that evening, I found Daniel working in his home office, surrounded by spreadsheets and property reports. The lines of strain around his eyes had deepened in recent weeks as Hartwell Properties' financial troubles mounted. You're home early, he said, glancing up briefly before returning to his laptop. Just for a change of clothes. I'm headed back. To help with dinner service. I leaned against the doorframe, studying my husband. How bad is it really, Daniel? The company situation. He sighed, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. Bad enough that Mother is willing to court investors she'd normally consider beneath our social tier. Bad enough that I'm starting to wonder if I'll be the Hartwell who loses the family legacy. The naked vulnerability in his voice struck me. Daniel rarely allowed himself to show weakness, a trait inherited from his mother along with his stubborn pride. You won't lose it, I said with quiet certainty. Your confidence is touching but misplaced. Unless the Chen Group agrees to invest on Sunday, we're weeks away from a hostile takeover by Meridian. I moved behind him, placing my hands on his tense shoulders. Tell me about these investors. Why does your mother think they'll respond better to a family dinner without me? Daniel hesitated, his discomfort palpable. Lawrence Chen is old school. His family has banking interests throughout Asia. Very traditional values, very particular about family structures and roles. Mother thinks that a working-class chef for a daughter-in-law would offend his sensibilities, I finished for him. I told her you could take the night off. Be there as my wife, not as a chef, Daniel said, a note of frustration finally entering his voice. But she insisted this was too important to risk. The Chens expect a certain family image. I absorbed this information, the pieces clicking into place. The Chen Group. Lawrence Chen. Could it be the same Lawrence Chen who had dined at Maison last month and sent his personal compliments to the chef? The same man who had later contacted Julian about potentially investing in Maison's expansion plans. Daniel, I said carefully, what if I told you I might know Lawrence Chen? He turned to face me, surprise evident in his expression. How would you know him? He rarely socializes outside his immediate circle, and he's only been in Seattle for business visits. I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. The conversation was straying dangerously close to topics I'd avoided for years. The true extent of my involvement with Maison, the success I'd achieved independently, the financial security I'd built while Daniel's family business began to crumble. The culinary world is smaller than you might think, I said finally. Chen has dined at Maison. He's expressed interest in the restaurant. Daniel's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. Do you think you could influence him somehow? Put in a good word for Hartwell Properties? The question stung more than it should have. Even now, Daniel saw my connections as potentially useful to his family rather than achievements in their own right. I don't know him well enough for that, I said, stepping back. I just thought it was an interesting coincidence. Daniel nodded, already turning back to his spreadsheets. Well, Mother has been cultivating this relationship for months. Sunday's dinner is the culmination of her efforts. The Chens are notoriously private about their investments until the last minute, but she's convinced they're ready to commit. I thought of the special menu I'd designed for Sunday, of my plan to reveal myself as Maison's owner after years of anonymity. If Lawrence Chen was indeed considering investing in both Maison and Hartwell properties, my revelation would complicate matters considerably. I need to get back to work, I said, already mentally adjusting my plans. Don't wait up. Daniel made a vague sound of acknowledgement, already reabsorbed in his financial crisis. As I changed clothes and prepared to return to Maison, my mind raced with new possibilities and complications. Victoria had no idea that by choosing my restaurant for this crucial business dinner, she had inadvertently created the perfect stage for revelations that would reshape both our family dynamics and her company's future. Lawrence Chen, the investor she was so carefully courting, had already expressed interest in partnering with Maison, with me, before ever meeting with Hartwell Properties. The question now was how to navigate Sunday's dinner in a way that would secure the best outcome for everyone, including Daniel, whose position between his mother and me grew more precarious by the day. By Saturday morning, preparations for Sunday's special menu were well underway. Wei had been nurturing stocks and sauces for days, developing the deep, complex flavors that would serve as foundations for each course. Fatima's dessert components were aging to perfection in the walk-in. Julian had cleared his schedule to focus exclusively on the execution of what we were now calling the Revelation menu. I had just finished testing the third course, a modern interpretation of my grandmother's red braised pork belly, transformed into an elegant bite that honored tradition while embracing innovation, when my phone rang. Lawrence Chen's name flashed on the screen. Since his visit to Maison last month, we had exchanged several calls about his potential investment in our expansion plans. Chen had been impressed not just by the food, but by the business model I'd created, a restaurant that balanced artistic integrity with financial success, exclusivity with sustainability. Mr. Chen, I answered, stepping into my office for privacy. This is unexpected. Ms. Chen Hartwell, his precise, formal voice replied. I apologize for the Saturday intrusion. I'm calling regarding our mutual interest discussions. I closed the door, leaning against my desk. Of course, I've been reviewing the expansion proposal with my team. Excellent. However, a new opportunity has come to my attention that may affect our arrangements. I believe I will be dining with your husband's family tomorrow evening. So he knew of my connection to the Hartwells. This complicated matters. Yes, at Maison, I confirmed, choosing my words carefully. Though I won't be joining the family dinner. There was a slight pause before Chen responded. Interesting. Victoria Hartwell gave me to understand that you were unavailable due to professional commitments. That's one interpretation, I said dryly. Mr. Chen, may I speak frankly? I prefer. Nothing else, he replied. My mother-in-law has specifically excluded me from tomorrow's dinner because she believes my background and profession would not align with your traditional values. She's presenting a vision of the Hartwell family that doesn't include me. Another pause, longer this time. I see. And yet you own the restaurant where this dinner will take place. His statement, not question, confirmed what I had suspected. Lawrence Chen had done his due diligence on Maison long before Victoria arranged this dinner. Yes, though that fact isn't widely known. My husband believes I'm merely a consultant there. A curious arrangement in a marriage, Chen observed, his tone neutral. One that evolved gradually, I explained. When I purchased Maison, our circumstances were different. As time passed, the separation between my professional success and my role in the Hartwell family became convenient in certain ways. And inconvenient in others, I imagine. Chen's perception was unsettling. Ms. Chen Hartwell, I am interested in investments that align with certain values: excellence, authenticity, vision. I find these qualities sometimes conflict with appearances, with what families like the Hartwells believe matters most. I held my breath, sensing we were navigating toward the heart of something important. Tomorrow evening, Chen continued, I will be evaluating more than a potential investment in Hartwell properties. Consider it a unique opportunity to understand the full landscape of possibilities. I understand, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I did. Excellent. I look forward to experiencing your restaurant's renowned Sunday service. I trust it will be illuminating. After the call ended, I sat at my desk, turning over Chen's words in my mind. He clearly knew more than he was revealing, playing a longer game than Victoria realized. Whatever I decided to do tomorrow night would affect not just my relationship with my husband's family, but potentially the future of both Maison and Hartwell properties. The stakes had just been raised considerably. Sunday dinner was no longer simply about claiming my place or revealing my success. It had become a complex negotiation of power, truth, and opportunity, conducted through the medium I understood best: food. I returned to the kitchen with renewed purpose. Each dish now needed to communicate not just my personal story, but my vision for the future. A future that might, with Chen's investment, expand beyond Maison's walls to reshape Hartwell properties as well. As I refined the menu with Wei and Julian, I made subtle adjustments, emphasizing elements that spoke to heritage and innovation together, tradition honored through evolution rather than rigid preservation. You've changed the progression, Wei noted as we replated the fourth course. More forward-looking now. The circumstances have evolved, I said simply. Sunday isn't just about revealing the past, it's about creating the future. Wei nodded, understanding as always. Then we must ensure each bite tells the right story. By evening, the final menu was set, the execution plan meticulous. I sent the team home early, wanting everyone rested for tomorrow's performance. Left alone in my restaurant, I walked through the dining room, imagining tomorrow night's scene. Victoria holding court at table 7, Daniel anxious but hopeful, Lawrence Chen observing everything with his penetrating gaze, and me, finally, stepping out of the shadows of the kitchen, claiming my place not just as Maison's owner and chef, but as a businesswoman with the vision and means to potentially save the very family that had worked so hard to exclude me. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that Seattle rarely offers. Sunlight streaming through windows, the distant Olympic mountains visible beyond the sound. I had barely slept, my mind continuously cycling through scenarios for the evening ahead. By 5 a.m., I abandoned any pretense of rest and drove to Maison. The restaurant was still dark when I arrived, the silence almost reverential. I moved through the dining room, straightening already perfect place settings, adjusting flower arrangements that needed no adjustment. When I reached table 7, Victoria's table, I paused, running my fingers along the back of what would be her chair. The arrangement was purposeful. Victoria would face the kitchen doors, giving her a clear view of Julian's periodic appearances throughout the meal. What she wouldn't see was me, working behind those swinging doors, crafting each perfect bite she would praise, until the final course. The weight of what I planned to do settled around my shoulders like a chef's coat. Tonight would change everything. My relationship with Daniel, my role in the Hartwell family, the future of both Maison and Hartwell properties. And Lawrence, Chen would witness it all, his investment decisions potentially hinging on how I handled this delicate situation. You're here early, even for you. I turned to find Sophia letting herself in through the front door, her arms laden with folders. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Too many moving pieces. She nodded in understanding, depositing her materials at the host station. I've updated the service notes for tonight. Table 7 will have Robert as their primary server, with me overseeing. I've also arranged the seating chart based on what we know about the party. I followed her to the small office off the dining room where she unfolded a diagram of Table 7's seating arrangement. Victoria will be here. Sophia indicated the head of the table, with Lawrence Chen to her right as the guest of honor. Daniel will be across from Chen, with his sister Emma beside him. Chen's associate, Michael Wong, will be here, and these 2 seats are for the other guests Victoria mentioned, a couple named Montgomery who apparently have connections to Seattle real estate. I studied the arrangement, mentally placing myself at the empty 8th chair that Victoria had likely requested be removed. She's positioned herself as the power center, I noted. Daniel isn't even at the opposite head of the table. Classic power dynamics, Sophia agreed. Would you like me to adjust anything? I considered the question carefully. No, let her have her illusion of control, for now. By noon, Maison hummed with the controlled chaos of preparation. Wei supervised a team of 3 commis preparing the components for each course, while Fatima meticulously assembled her architectural dessert creations in the separate pastry kitchen. Julian moved between stations, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, his usual casual demeanor replaced by intense focus. The dashi needs another 10 minutes, I told him after sampling the barely simmering stock. The kombu hasn't fully released. It's umami yet. Julian nodded, making a note on his prep list. Layla is concerned about the timing on the 4th course. The squab needs to rest precisely 7 minutes before slicing, which creates a tight window for 7 diners. We'll hold the previous course an extra 3 minutes, I decided. The palate cleanser can linger without compromise. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas, rushing through the kitchen doors with unusual urgency. Chef, there's someone here asking for you. A Ms. Hartwell. My stomach tightened. Victoria is here. Now? Thomas shook his head. Not Victoria. She said her name is Emma Hartwell. Emma, Daniel's younger sister. The family rebel who had defied Victoria's expectations by pursuing a career in environmental law rather than joining the family business. We had always maintained a cordial if distant relationship, our interactions limited to family gatherings where Emma typically arrived late, left early, and spent the intervening time sparring verbally with her mother. I'll see her in my office, I said, removing my apron. Julian, keep an eye on that dashi. I found Emma waiting in the small reception area, looking out of place in her casual Sunday attire amidst Maison's elegance. At 32, 4 years younger than Daniel, she had the same striking Hartwell features, high cheekbones, intense blue eyes, but wore her dark hair in a short, practical cut that Victoria continually lamented. Emma, I greeted her, genuinely surprised. This is unexpected. She turned from her contemplation of the artwork on the wall, a series of food market photographs I'd taken during my travels in Asia. Amara, sorry to barge in. I know you must be busy. It's fine. Let's talk. In my office. As I led her through the restaurant toward the administrative area, I caught her studying the space with newfound interest, as if seeing it for the first time. When we reached my office, modestly appointed with a small desk, comfortable visitor, chairs and walls lined with culinary reference books, she settled into a seat with uncharacteristic hesitation. I won't take much of your time, she began. I'm sure you're preparing for tonight's dinner. You're attending? I asked, though I already knew the answer from Sophia's seating chart. Emma grimaced. Mother insisted. Apparently, a united family, front is essential to securing the Chen investment. She even made me promise to wear a dress and refrain from mentioning my recent environmental lawsuit against one of Chen's shipping subsidiaries. This was classic Victoria, manipulating appearances. At all costs. Yet you're here instead of helping her prepare for this critical dinner. Emma's gaze sharpened. I'm here because I think you should know something before tonight. Something about Lawrence Chen. My pulse quickened. What about him? I did some research after Mother announced this dinner. Professional habit, she explained, with a small shrug. Chen doesn't make investment decisions based on fancy meals or family appearances. He's ruthlessly pragmatic about where he puts his money. Most successful investors are, I observed neutrally. Yes, but Chen has a particular philosophy. He believes in backing people, not just concepts or brands, and he's especially interested in— She hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully, in supporting businesses where women play significant leadership roles, particularly in traditionally male-dominated industries. The information settled between us, its implications clear. Victoria's decision to exclude me, based on her assumption of Chen's traditional values, might actually undermine her efforts rather than support them. That's interesting, I said. How did you discover this pattern? His investment portfolio shows it clearly. The Chen Group has backed female-led enterprises across Asia, Europe, and North America. It's not publicized, but the pattern is there if you know how to— Look! Emma leaned forward slightly. Amara, I think my mother has fundamentally misread the situation. Chen wants to meet you, not avoid you. I absorbed this information, mentally recalibrating my understanding of tonight's dynamics. Chen's cryptic comments during our call yesterday suddenly made more sense. His interest in authenticity and values that conflict with appearances suggested he already knew more about me, and possibly about Maison's ownership, than Victoria realized. Thank you for telling me this, I said finally, though I'm curious why you would undermine your mother's strategy. Emma's expression hardened slightly. I'm not undermining her strategy. I'm trying to save the family business despite her strategy. Mother's insistence on maintaining appearances over substance is exactly what got Hartwell Properties into trouble in the first place. What do you mean? Emma sighed, running a hand through her short hair. The company's financial problems aren't just bad luck or market downturns. Mother has been rejecting potentially profitable projects that don't fit her idea of Hartwell prestige, while pursuing vanity developments that look impressive but yield minimal returns. Daniel sees it but can't stand up to her. My father enabled it for years before he died. This aligned with what I had observed from the periphery of family discussions, but heard more explicitly than ever before. And you think Chen might save the company? I think Chen might be the only investor sophisticated enough to see past Mother's smoke and mirrors to the actual value underlying our properties and development capacities. But he won't invest if he senses dishonesty or pretense. Emma fixed me with a direct look. Which is why I think you should be at dinner tonight, not hidden away in the kitchen. The suggestion hung in the air between us. Emma didn't know I owned Maison. She didn't know about my plan to reveal myself during the final course. She was simply making a logical argument based on her assessment of Lawrence Chen's investment priorities. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. But Victoria has made her wishes clear. I won't be attending dinner as a guest. Emma looked disappointed but not surprised. I understand. I just thought you should know what you're up against. Mother is presenting a version of our family that doesn't exist, and never has. Why do you care? I asked, genuinely curious. You've never been particularly invested in the family business. Because despite everything, I care about Daniel, and I know how much Hartwell Properties means to him. She stood, preparing to leave. Also, between us, I've always thought you got a raw deal from my mother. You deserve better. The unexpected alliance touched me. Emma and I had never been close, our relationship defined primarily by our connections to Daniel rather than to each other. This gesture of support, this sharing of information that Victoria would consider betrayal, suggested possibilities I hadn't considered. Thank you for coming, I said, rising to walk her out. It means a lot. At the front door, Emma paused. Just out of curiosity, why does Julian Weber let you use an office here? I thought you were just a consultant. The question caught me off guard. We have a unique arrangement. Emma studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. I see. Her tone suggested she might indeed see more than I'd intended to reveal. Good luck tonight, Amara. I think we might all need it. After she left, I returned to the kitchen, my mind racing with new information. If Emma was right about Chen's investment philosophy, Victoria's exclusion strategy might backfire spectacularly. And if Chen already suspected I owned Maison, tonight's revelation might not be the shock I'd anticipated, but instead a confirmation of what he'd already deduced. The landscape had shifted yet again, like a soufflé changing structure in the heat of the oven. By 5 o'clock, Maison hummed with the focused energy that precedes service. The kitchen gleamed, mise en place perfectly arranged at each station. Front-of-house staff moved through their pre-service routines, polishing glassware, lighting candles, reviewing the special instructions for each reservation. I gathered the team for our final briefing, outlining once more the precise timing and execution required for the Hartwell party. Table 7 will be seated at 7 sharp, I concluded. Each course must be flawless, each service impeccable. Tonight isn't just about food, it's about telling a story through each plate. A story with quite a twist ending, Julian added with a knowing smile. A necessary revelation, I corrected. Now, stations in 15 minutes. We open doors in 30. As the team dispersed, my phone vibrated with a text from Daniel. Just leaving home now. Mother insists we arrive 15 minutes early to set the tone for Chen. Wish me luck. I stared at the message, a strange hollowness expanding in my chest. Daniel was heading to a dinner that would potentially determine his family's financial future, and he had no idea that his wife, the person who should be his closest ally, was about to upend everything he thought he knew about her. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I making a terrible mistake? Should I abandon my plan, continue in my comfortable behind-the-scenes role, find some other way to help the Hartwell business without exposing my secret? The thought evaporated as quickly as it formed. Too many lies had accumulated. Too many small compromises had eroded the foundation of my marriage. Whatever happened tonight, truth was the only path forward that I could live with. I texted back simply, "Good luck. Remember to breathe." At precisely 6:45, Sophia's voice came through on the kitchen communication system. Hartwell party arriving. Victoria Hartwell, Daniel Hartwell, and Emma Hartwell. I moved to the small window in the kitchen door, watching, as Victoria swept into the restaurant like a queen entering her court. She wore a tailored navy dress, her silver hair arranged in an elegant twist, diamonds glinting at her ears and throat. Daniel followed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his tall frame, his expression already strained despite the evening barely beginning. Emma trailed behind, transformed from her casual appearance earlier into a reluctant vision in emerald green, her discomfort evident in her stiff posture. Sophia greeted them warmly, escorting them to table 7 with the perfect balance of deference and confidence that had made her invaluable to Maison's success. I watched as Victoria instinctively adjusted the place settings, inspected the glassware, and surveyed the room to evaluate the other diners. All behaviors I'd witnessed countless times at family gatherings. "The dragon has landed," Wei murmured beside me, his presence always somehow materializing exactly when needed. "She looks hungry." "For food or power?" I asked wryly. "Both, I think." "Are you ready for this, Amara?" I stepped back from the window, turning to face the kitchen. My domain, my creation, the place where I had always felt most authentically myself. I've been ready for 7 years. At 6:55, Sophia's voice came through again. Lawrence Chen and Michael Wong arriving. Again, I moved to the window. Lawrence Chen entered with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention without demanding it. In his early 60s, impeccably dressed in a custom suit that spoke of wealth without ostentation. He carried himself with the dignified bearing that came from genuine self-assurance rather than practiced posturing. The younger man beside him, Michael Wong, presumably, carried a sleek portfolio and scanned the restaurant with the alert gaze of someone constantly collecting and analyzing information. Victoria rose immediately, extending her hand with a warm smile that never quite reached her eyes. Daniel stood as well, his handshake appropriately firm, his greeting appropriately deferential. Emma's greeting was more reserved, but polite. I watched as Chen was seated to Victoria's right, exactly as Sophia had predicted. The conversation appeared immediately animated, Victoria gesturing with practiced elegance as she undoubtedly began her carefully rehearsed pitch about Hartwell Properties' illustrious history and promising future. At precisely 7:05, the final members of the party arrived. The Montgomerys, a silver-haired couple who moved through the restaurant with the easy familiarity of frequent fine diners. Their presence completed the tableau Victoria had orchestrated, a perfect blend of family, potential investors, and social witnesses to validate the proceedings. All players are on stage, Julian observed, joining me at the window. Shall we begin the show? I nodded, stepping back into the heart of the kitchen. First course in 5 minutes. Let's transform their evening. The first 3 courses proceeded with the precision of a culinary ballet. Each plate left the kitchen perfectly, composed, each flavor harmonizing with the next, each presentation more stunning than the last. Julian made his expected appearances, greeting the table with practiced charm, accepting Victoria's effusive compliments with appropriate modesty. Through the kitchen window, I watched the dynamic at the table evolve. Victoria maintained her position as conversation director, but I noticed Chen increasingly engaging with Emma, his interest apparently piqued by something she'd said. Daniel spoke when addressed, but seemed tense, his gaze frequently drifting toward the kitchen as if searching for something, or someone. After the 4th course, the squab with cherry gastrique that had concerned Layla, Julian returned to the kitchen with an update. Victoria is in full performance mode, he reported, wiping his hands on a towel. She's outlined the entire Hartwell development strategy for the next 5 years, emphasizing heritage and exclusivity. Chen is polite but non-committal. The interesting part is that he's asked twice about the creative direction of the restaurant. What did you tell him? I asked, plating the 5th course, a palate cleanser of yuzu granita with shiso foam. I gave him our standard line about collaborative development and executive oversight. He smiled in that knowing way of his and said he looked forward to meeting the true creative force behind Maison someday. The statement confirmed my suspicion. Chen knew, or at least strongly suspected, that Julian was not the ultimate authority in this kitchen. He'll get his wish sooner than he expects, I said, adding the final garnish to each plate. Is Daniel still watching the kitchen? Julian nodded. Like he's expecting you to walk through the door any minute. I think he senses something's up. Daniel had always been intuitive about my moods, often reading my intentions before I voiced them. It was one of the qualities that had drawn me to him initially, his emotional intelligence that balanced Victoria's calculating pragmatism. He'll know soon enough, I said. Send out the 5th course. We're approaching the finale. As service continued, I felt a strange calm descend. Whatever happened in the next hour would irrevocably change my life, my marriage, my relationship with the Hartwell family, possibly the future of both Maison and Hartwell Properties. Yet standing in my kitchen, directing my team, executing my vision, I felt centered in a way I rarely experienced in Victoria's presence. While the 6th course was being served, a signature dish that had earned Maison its first major review, I stepped into my office to change from my chef's whites into the outfit I'd carefully selected for my appearance, a tailored black dress with subtle red accents that nodded to my Chinese heritage while projecting professional authority. Wei. appeared in the doorway as I was fastening a simple jade pendant around my neck, my grandmother's, the only piece of her I had left. "The final course is being plated," he said. "Are you certain about this, Amara?" I met his gaze in the small mirror. "I've never been more certain of anything." He nodded once, his expression softening slightly. "Then I will ensure it is perfect. The revelation should match the quality of the dish itself. Thank you, Wei, for everything." As he turned to leave, he paused. "Your grandmother would be proud, not of the restaurant or the success, but of your courage tonight." His words, among the most personal he had ever spoken to me, steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. I took a deep breath, checked my appearance one final time, and prepared to step out of the shadows and into the light of my own creation. The seventh and final course awaited, a dessert that represented the culmination of my journey, featuring elements from both my Chinese heritage and my classical training, traditions transformed through innovation. On each plate, Fatima had created a delicate chocolate structure that, when broken by the diner, would reveal a hidden center of vibrant flavors and textures. The perfect metaphor for what I was about to do. I picked up the first plate myself, the one destined for Victoria, and nodded to Julian. "It's time." Julian pushed through the kitchen doors with the practiced ease of a performer taking the stage, balancing the seventh course for Victoria with the precision of a tightrope walker. I followed 3 steps behind, my heartbeat so loud. In my ears, I was certain the entire kitchen staff could hear it. The final dessert, Fatima's masterpiece of chocolate architecture filled with hidden surprises, rested on fine bone china in my hands. "Stop." Wei's voice, quiet but commanding, halted me just before I reached the doors. He approached with deliberate steps, adjusted the placement of a single edible gold leaf on the dessert by mere millimeters, then nodded once. "Now it is perfect. Go." Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the swinging doors into the dining room, following Julian's confident stride toward table 7. The restaurant hummed with the satisfaction of diners enjoying exceptional meals. The lighting dimmed, to the perfect ambiance that made everyone look their best. As we approached the Hartwell table, I could see Victoria mid-sentence, gesturing animatedly to Lawrence Chen, who maintained a polite but inscrutable expression. Julian reached the table first. "For our final course," he announced with the theatrical flair that had made him the perfect public face for Maison. "We present hidden depths, a study in contrasts and revelations." Victoria's face lit with the practiced appreciation she reserved for moments of cultural significance. "Chef Julian, you've outdone yourself this evening. Each course has been more extraordinary than the last." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell," Julian replied, setting the dessert before her. "But I cannot take credit for tonight's menu." I stepped forward then, placing the second dessert before Lawrence Chen. Victoria's eyes widened in shock as she registered my presence, her composure momentarily fracturing before she reassembled it into a tight smile. "Amara," she managed through gritted teeth. "What a surprise." Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he glanced between his mother and me. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to be suppressing a smile, her eyes suddenly alight with interest. I continued serving, placing each dessert with deliberate care before each guest, saving Daniel's for last. When everyone had been served, I straightened and addressed the table. "Good evening. I hope you've enjoyed your meal so far." My voice was steady, betraying none of the nervous energy coursing through me. This final course represents the culmination of a journey, a revelation of what lies beneath the surface. Victoria's eyes darted around the table, clearly calculating the social damage control required. "How thoughtful of you to help serve, Amara. I'm sure you need to get back to whatever you were doing." Lawrence Chen studied me with undisguised interest. "Ms. Chen Hartwell, a pleasure to finally meet you." His emphasis on finally was subtle but unmistakable. "Mr. Chen," I acknowledged with a small bow of my head. I've been looking forward to meeting you as well. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Amara occasionally consults with Maison's kitchen staff. Such a lovely hobby for her. Much more than a hobby, I think, Chen replied, his gaze never leaving my face. Based on tonight's extraordinary menu. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 7 years of diminishment, of hiding my light, of allowing Victoria's narrative to overwrite my own. Mr. Chen is correct. I am not a consultant at Maison. I paused, letting my gaze move to each person at the table. I am the owner and executive chef. The silence that followed was absolute, as if the entire restaurant had paused to witness this moment. Victoria's face drained of color, her hand frozen around her water glass. Daniel stared at me with an expression of stunned disbelief. Emma's smile bloomed into a full grin. That's impossible, Victoria finally managed. Julian Weber is the executive chef and owner. Everyone knows that. Julian is the face of Maison, I corrected gently. He has been instrumental to our success, but I created this restaurant. I designed every aspect of it, from the menu concepts to the interior. I purchased it 3 years ago when the previous owner needed to sell. Daniel found his voice at last. You bought a restaurant? Without telling me? The hurt in his eyes was genuine, and despite my resolve, I felt a flicker of guilt. I made the initial purchase when we were first married, using my savings and some investors who believed in my vision. I never intended it to be a permanent secret, but as time passed, I glanced at Victoria, then back to Daniel. It became easier to maintain the separation between my professional life and my role as a Hartwell wife. Victoria's shock was transforming rapidly into anger. This is absurd. If you owned a successful restaurant like Maison, we would know. The financial implications alone would have been evident in our joint accounts, I finished for her. Except, we've maintained separate finances since our marriage at your suggestion, Victoria. You told Daniel that professional women like me value their financial independence. Another recommendation from Victoria that I had accepted without challenge, not recognizing at the time how it would enable her to minimize my contributions and prevent my success from becoming part of the family narrative. Chen broke the tense silence with a small chuckle. Fascinating. I had my suspicions, of course. The pattern of innovation at Maison has been remarkable, consistent yet evolving in a way that suggested a single creative vision. He lifted his dessert spoon. Shall we enjoy this final revelation? Before continuing our discussion, it was a masterful redirection, giving everyone at the table a moment to collect themselves. One by one, the guests broke through the delicate chocolate structures of their desserts, revealing the vibrant components hidden within, a metaphor made edible. Daniel stared at his plate without touching it. How could you keep this from me for 3 years? He asked quietly. His voice meant only for me, though the table's silence ensured everyone heard. The same way you've kept me from family business discussions, I replied, equally soft. One small decision at a time, until the pattern was set. Victoria regained her composure with visible effort. This is hardly the time or place for marital discord. Our guests... Actually, Chen interrupted smoothly, this seems precisely relevant to our discussions. I have been considering investments in both Hartwell properties and Maison's expansion plans. Learning that there's a connection between them is illuminating. Victoria's head snapped toward him. Expansion plans? You've been discussing investment with my daughter-in-law behind my back? Chen's expression remained impassive. I discuss potential investments with business owners, Mrs. Hartwell. Ms. Chen Hartwell's marital status is incidental to her impressive accomplishments with Maison. Emma leaned forward slightly. Mother, perhaps instead of seeing this as a betrayal, you might recognize it as an opportunity. Amara has built something remarkable here. That's an asset to the family, not a threat. The unexpected support from Emma seemed to catch Victoria off guard. She looked around the table, realizing she was losing control of both the narrative and her carefully orchestrated dinner. Her eyes narrowed as she focused on me. "You deliberately orchestrated this humiliation," she accused. "You chose tonight, of all nights, to reveal your little secret. When you knew how important this dinner was to the family." "I chose tonight," I acknowledged, "because tonight you banned me from a family dinner at my own restaurant. It seemed the perfect time to reclaim my place, both here and in this family." Victoria pushed her dessert away untouched. "This isn't about your place. This is about your dishonesty, about the secret life you've been leading while pretending. To be part of our family." The accusation stung, especially because it contained a kernel of truth. I had maintained a separation between my professional success and my married life, not out of malice, but as a form of self-preservation. "I didn't create the conditions that made secrecy seem necessary," I responded, keeping my voice level. "From the moment Daniel introduced us, you made it clear that my background, my career, my ambitions were inadequate for a Hartwell wife. I tried for years to meet your impossible standards, to be accepted on your terms. And when that didn't work," Victoria cut in, "you decided to undermine me, to embarrass me in front of important business associates?" I shook my head. "No. When that didn't work, I built something for myself, something that couldn't be diminished or dismissed, something that was wholly mine." I gestured to the restaurant around us. Maison became my sanctuary, the place where my vision and my voice were valued without qualification. Daniel had remained silent throughout this exchange, his expression shifting from hurt to contemplation. Now he looked up, addressing me directly. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you think I wouldn't be proud of you? That I wouldn't support your success?" The question penetrated straight to the heart of the matter, the gradual erosion of trust that had occurred so subtly I hadn't fully recognized it until this moment. "I think," I said carefully, "that I feared you would be caught in the middle, that you would be forced to choose between supporting my ambitions and meeting your mother's expectations. And based on past patterns, I wasn't confident which choice you would make," Victoria scoffed. "Melodramatic nonsense. Daniel has always supported your little cooking career. My little cooking career has resulted in the most exclusive restaurant in Seattle," I pointed out. "A restaurant with a 3-month waiting list, multiple awards, and review scores that put us in the top tier nationally. Yet you've consistently treated my work as a hobby, something to be tolerated until I assumed what you consider a proper role as a Hartwell wife." Mr. Montgomery, who had been watching this exchange with the fascinated expression of someone witnessing an unexpected plot twist at the theater, cleared his throat. "I must say, the revelation that you're the genius behind tonight's extraordinary meal makes me even more impressed. My wife and I have dined at Michelin-starred restaurants across Europe, and this experience rivals the best of them." His wife nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely transcendent. The way each course built upon the last, telling a story through flavor and presentation. That's artistry of the highest order." Their genuine appreciation momentarily displaced the tension, reminding everyone that we were still in a public setting. Chen seemed pleased by the Montgomerys' assessment, nodding slightly as if they had confirmed his own judgment. Victoria, recognizing the shift in dynamics, attempted to regain control. "Well, we are all certainly surprised by this information. But perhaps we should return to the purpose of our dinner. Mr. Chen, about the potential investment in Hartwell properties." "I think," Chen interrupted gently but firmly, "that our discussion has evolved beyond its original parameters. I'm now quite interested in exploring the synergistic possibilities between Hartwell properties and Maison. A development portfolio enhanced by world-class culinary destinations could be uniquely compelling. I hadn't anticipated this direction, though perhaps I should have." Chen was a businessman first and foremost, and he clearly saw opportunity in the unexpected connection between the two enterprises he had been separately considering. Victoria's expression froze in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm afraid you misunderstand. Amara's restaurant has nothing to do with Hartwell Properties. They are entirely separate entities. Actually, I said, making a decision in that moment that would irrevocably alter my relationship with the Hartwell family. I've been considering an investment in Hartwell Properties myself. Daniel's head snapped up. What? For the past 6 months, I continued, addressing my husband directly, I've been consulting with financial advisors about using some of Maison's profits to invest in your family business. I knew it was struggling, and I wanted to help. Without telling me? Daniel's voice was incredulous. Without any discussion. I was waiting for the right moment, I admitted, and honestly, I wasn't sure how Victoria would react to the idea of accepting financial help from me. Victoria's laugh was sharp. How generous. And now you present this offer in front of Mr. Chen, making it impossible for us to decline without appearing ungrateful. Another manipulation. Chen raised a hand slightly, commanding attention without raising his voice, a skill I'd observed in the most successful chefs and business leaders alike. If I may offer an observation, it seems to me that both Hartwell Properties and Maison have reached important inflection points. One faces financial challenges despite its storied history, the other stands on the cusp of expansion after remarkable initial success. He turned to Victoria. Mrs. Hartwell, you have maintained control of your family company through sheer force of will, preserving its legacy even as market forces have moved against you. That demonstrates admirable determination. Then to me, Ms. Chen Hartwell, you have built something extraordinary from nothing, through vision and excellence, without the advantage of an established name. That shows remarkable talent. Chen placed his napkin beside his empty dessert plate. I am interested in enterprises where tradition and innovation complement each other, where legacy and fresh vision combine to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The unexpected connection between your businesses presents precisely such an opportunity. Emma leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Chen? A 3-way partnership, he replied simply. The Chen Group providing capital and international connections, Hartwell Properties contributing its portfolio and development expertise, and Maison offering its culinary excellence and brand cachet. He turned to his associate, who immediately produced documents from his portfolio. I've had my team draft preliminary terms for both investments. In light of tonight's revelations, perhaps they should be reconsidered as a single, integrated proposal. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes, weighing her dislike of me against the financial lifeline Chen was offering, her pride against the reality of Hartwell Properties' precarious position. Daniel broke the silence. I think we need time to discuss this as a family. Tonight has been illuminating in many ways. Chen nodded. Of course. Business decisions should never be rushed, especially when family dynamics are involved. He rose smoothly from his chair. Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for arranging this fascinating evening. Ms. Chen Hartwell, my compliments on an exceptional culinary experience. I look forward to hearing from both of you once you've had time to consider my proposal. With perfect timing, Sophia appeared to escort Chen and his associate from the table. The Montgomerys, sensing the need for family privacy, also made their excuses and departed, leaving Victoria, Daniel, Emma, and me alone at the table. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ambient noise of the restaurant, muted conversations, the gentle clink of silverware, soft background music, created a cocoon around our silent tableau. Well, Emma finally said, that was the most interesting family dinner we've had in years. Victoria turned to her with a withering look. You knew about this, didn't you? That's why you insisted Amara should be included tonight. Emma shook her head. I didn't know she owned Maison. But I suspected there was more to her involvement here than she'd revealed, and I knew Chen valued female leadership in his investments. Something you might have discovered if you'd researched him properly instead of making assumptions based on outdated stereotypes. "How dare you?" Victoria began, but Daniel cut her off. "Enough." His voice was quiet but carried an authority I rarely heard him use with his mother. "This isn't helping anything." He turned to me, his expression a complex mixture of hurt, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "We need to talk. Not here, not now, but soon." Then to Victoria, "Mother, I'll drive you home. I think we've all had enough revelations for one evening." Victoria gathered her purse with rigid dignity. "This isn't over, Amara. You've made a spectacle of our family in public. There will be consequences." "There already have been consequences," I replied evenly. 7 years of them. Tonight simply brought everything into the open where it can finally be addressed honestly. Victoria stood, straightening her shoulders like a general preparing for battle. "Daniel, I'll wait for you by the door. I need air." As she walked away, her posture impeccable despite the evening's upheaval, Emma leaned toward me. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. It was messy, but necessary." Daniel watched his sister leave to join their mother, then turned back to me. "Is there somewhere private we can talk? Just for a moment, before I take them home?" I nodded, leading him through the dining room to my office. Once inside with the door closed, the sounds of the restaurant faded to a distant murmur. Daniel stood in the center of the room, looking at the space that represented a life he hadn't known I was leading. 3 years, he said. Not quite a question. Yes. All those late nights, the weekend consultations, the trips to meet with suppliers, that was all for Maison? I nodded. I never lied about working. I just didn't specify the exact nature of my role. A lie of omission is still a lie, Amara. The hurt in his voice was palpable. Yes, I acknowledged. Just like telling me I wasn't invited to dinner tonight because traditional investors wouldn't appreciate my presence, when the truth was, your mother didn't want me there. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when stressed. So this was revenge? Humiliating my mother in front of Chen to get back at her for excluding you? No. I moved to stand directly in front of him, forcing him to meet my eyes. This was about finally claiming my place, both professionally and in our marriage. This was about refusing to be diminished or hidden away any longer. You could have told me privately. We could have figured it out together. Could we? I challenged gently. When have you ever stood up to your mother on my behalf, Daniel? When have you ever chosen my needs over her expectations? He flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's truthful. And after tonight, I think we both deserve complete truth, however uncomfortable. Daniel was silent for a long moment, looking around at the office that represented my separate life. The books, the files, the awards discreetly displayed on a side shelf. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. I need to take Mother home. This has been a shock for her. And for you, I acknowledged. Yes. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Chen's proposal. The 3-way partnership. Were you serious about investing in Hartwell properties? I was. I am, I corrected. Despite everything, I care about what matters to you, Daniel. The family business matters to you. Something shifted in his expression. A recognition, perhaps, of the fundamental imbalance that had characterized our relationship for years. I need to think. About everything. I understand. I made no move to touch him, sensing he needed space. We'll talk tomorrow? He nodded once, then left, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone in my office, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The weight of secrecy I'd carried for years had been lifted, but what would replace it remained uncertain. I had finally revealed my true self to the Hartwell family, but the cost of that revelation was yet to be determined. For now, though, I had a restaurant to run. I straightened my shoulders, checked my appearance in the small mirror on the wall, and prepared to return to the kitchen, to my domain, to the place where I had always been exactly who I was meant to be. Whatever tomorrow brought with Daniel, with Victoria, with Chen's business proposal, tonight I would finish service as the executive chef and owner of Maison, a truth now known to everyone who mattered. The night after the dinner revelation dragged on endlessly. I stayed at Maison until the last diners departed, working alongside Wei to ensure the kitchen was immaculate for tomorrow's service. By 1 a.m., even the most dedicated staff had gone home, leaving me alone in the restaurant that had become both my greatest achievement and the catalyst for my marital crisis. I hadn't heard from Daniel since he'd left with Victoria hours earlier. His silence spoke volumes, more deafening than any argument we might have had. 7 years of marriage reduced to unanswered text messages and the hollow echo of my footsteps in the empty dining room. The drive home felt surreal, the familiar streets of Seattle blurring beneath streetlights that seemed dimmer than usual. I half expected to find the house dark and empty, perhaps with a note explaining Daniel's absence. Instead, I found him sitting in our living room, still in his suit pants and dress shirt, though the tie and jacket had been discarded. A tumbler of whiskey rested untouched on the coffee table before him. "You're still up," I said, placing my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, a piece I'd commissioned from a local artist years ago, before Maison, before the secrets had begun accumulating between us. Couldn't sleep. His voice was flat, devoid of the anger I'd anticipated. Feels strange trying to sleep next to someone you realize you don't really know. The words stung, but I couldn't argue with their fundamental truth. I moved into the room, taking a seat in the armchair across from him rather than beside him on the sofa, a physical manifestation of the distance between us. "I'm still the same person, Daniel. Are you?" He finally looked at me directly. "My wife of 7 years owns the most acclaimed restaurant in Seattle. She's been living a double life, building an entirely separate existence that I knew nothing about. That doesn't sound like the same person to me." "It wasn't a double life," I protested. "Just a compartmentalized one." Semantics. He reached for the whiskey, then set it back down without drinking. "After you revealed yourself tonight, Chen's associate approached me while you were in the kitchen. Do you know what he said?" I shook my head. "He said the Chen Group has been tracking Maison's success for over a year. That your business model, combining ultimate quality with strategic exclusivity, matched their investment profile perfectly. That they considered you one of the most promising restaurateurs on the West Coast." Daniel's laugh was hollow. "My mother's been pulling strings for months to get a meeting with Chen, and all this time he was already interested in my wife's business, a business I didn't even know existed." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "It was never my intention to humiliate you." "Just my mother?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. No, that wasn't my goal either. I just needed to reclaim my place, both in my restaurant and in our family. By orchestrating a public revelation that made both me and my mother look like fools. "That wasn't my intent," I insisted. "But after years of being dismissed and excluded, after being explicitly uninvited from a family dinner at my own restaurant, I needed to make a statement that couldn't be minimized or explained away." Daniel was silent for a long moment, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. "When did we stop talking to each other, Amara? Really talking? When did we start keeping the most important parts of our lives secret from each other?" The question pierced through my defensiveness, touching the heart of what had gone wrong between us. I thought back to our early days, the passionate discussions about food and architecture that had first drawn us together, the shared dreams of creating spaces that would transform experiences, the vulnerability we'd once shown each other. I think, I said slowly. It happened so gradually that neither of us noticed. A small concession here to keep peace with your mother. A detail omitted there to avoid a difficult conversation. Until eventually, silence became our default. And separate lives became easier than confronting the truth. Daniel's voice had lost its edge, revealing the sadness beneath. I let it happen too. I chose the path of least resistance, with my mother, with the family business, with you. The admission surprised me. I'd prepared for anger, for accusations, even for ultimatums. I hadn't expected this quiet acknowledgement of shared responsibility. What happens now? I asked. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I don't know. Chen's proposal changes everything, professionally and personally. Mother is, well, you can imagine. Furious? Plotting my demise? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Actually, she's been on the phone with our attorneys since we left the restaurant. I think she's trying to find a way to accept Chen's offer without having to acknowledge your role in it. That sounds like Victoria. She's complicated, Daniel said, an echo of the defense he'd offered countless times over the years. But this time, he continued, and she's wrong about you. She's always been wrong about you. I held my breath, afraid to break the moment with the wrong response. I should have told her that years ago, he admitted. I should have stood up for you, for us, instead of trying to be the peacemaker. I convinced myself I was protecting everyone, but really, I was just avoiding conflict. We both made mistakes, I offered. I should have trusted you with the truth about Maison from the beginning. Daniel finally took a sip of his whiskey. Why didn't you? Was it just about my mother, or was there more to it? The question deserved an honest answer. I took a moment to organize my thoughts, to push past the practiced explanations I'd constructed over the years. At first, it was practical, I began. I wasn't sure the restaurant would succeed, and I didn't want to tie our finances to a risky venture. Then, as Maison started to thrive, I found myself enjoying having something that was entirely mine, something separate from the Hartwell world where I always felt like an outsider. I paused, searching for the words to explain the more complicated truth. But eventually, I think I kept the secret because I was afraid. Of what? Of having to choose, I admitted. I was afraid that if my success became visible, if it couldn't be minimized or dismissed as a hobby, it would force a confrontation. I'd have to choose between being the wife your mother thought you deserved and being the chef and owner I knew I could be. Daniel was quiet, absorbing this. And you didn't think I would choose you over her expectations. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I wasn't sure, and I couldn't bear to find out I was right. The painful honesty hung between us. Neither accusation nor defense, but simply truth, the first completely unvarnished truth we'd shared in years. I would have chosen you, Daniel said finally. I should have chosen you all along. The words I'd longed to hear for years now landed with bittersweet impact. And now? Now? He seemed to search for the right words. Now I think we have important decisions to make. About Chen's offer, about Hartwell Properties, about Maison, and about us. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it, then back at me. It's Emma. Apparently, Mother has made a decision about Chen's proposal. She wants to meet tomorrow morning at her house. All of us? Specifically all of us, including you. He seemed as surprised as I was. 9 a.m. I nodded, too exhausted from the day's emotional marathon to speculate about Victoria's motives. We should try to get some sleep then. Daniel stood, picking up his untouched whiskey. I'll take the guest room tonight. We both need space to think. Watched him go, feeling the weight of everything said and unsaid between us. Whatever Victoria had planned for tomorrow's meeting, whatever decision Daniel and I would ultimately make about our marriage, tonight had cracked open the carefully constructed facade we'd both maintained for years. The truth, painful, complicated, necessary, had finally begun to emerge. Victoria Hartwell's home in the exclusive Madison Park neighborhood overlooked Lake Washington with the entitled assurance of old money. The craftsman-style mansion had been in her husband's family for 3 generations, its classic lines and impeccable gardens projecting exactly the image of established stability that Victoria had always prioritized. As Daniel and I approached the front door the next morning, I felt a strange calm. The confrontation I'd avoided for years was finally happening, but on dramatically different terms than I'd ever imagined. I was no longer the insecure chef trying to fit into the Hartwell world. I was the owner of Maison, a successful businesswoman, whose connection to the family now offered potential salvation for their struggling company. Emma opened the door before we could ring the bell, her expression a mixture of amusement and warning. "Brace yourselves," she murmured. "Mother's been up all night with the lawyers. She's operating on caffeine and sheer force of will." She led us through to Victoria's formal study, a wood-paneled room with views of the garden that had always reminded me of an imperious ship captain's quarters. Victoria sat behind a massive desk that had belonged to Daniel's grandfather, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit despite the early hour and family setting. Mr. Franklin, the family's longtime attorney, stood beside her with a portfolio of documents. "Daniel, Amara," Victoria acknowledged our arrival with a nod. "Thank you for coming promptly. We have much to discuss." The formality set the tone immediately. This was a business meeting, not a family reconciliation. I took a seat beside Daniel in the leather chairs positioned before Victoria's desk, with Emma settling into an armchair near the window. "I've spent the night considering Mr. Chen's proposal," Victoria began without preamble. "After consulting with our attorneys and financial advisors, I've determined that it represents the best path forward for Hartwell Properties." She delivered this conclusion with the same decisive tone she might use to select a wine at dinner. No hint of the capitulation it actually represented. "However," she continued, her gaze fixing on me, "the integrated nature of his offer, linking Hartwell Properties with Maison, presents certain complications that must be addressed." "I'm listening," I said, matching her businesslike tone. Victoria gestured to Mr. Franklin, who placed a document on the desk between us. "We've drafted a preliminary agreement that would structure the partnership in a way that maintains appropriate separation between the entities while allowing you for the synergies Mr. Chen envisions." I glanced at the document but didn't reach for it. "What exactly are you proposing, Victoria?" "A holding company," she replied. "Chen would invest in this parent entity, which would maintain controlling interests in both Hartwell Properties and Maison while allowing each to operate independently under its current leadership." Daniel leaned forward. "And the ownership structure of this holding company?" 60% Hartwell family, 40% Chen Group, Victoria stated, with Maison incorporated as a subsidiary of Hartwell Assets. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The audacity was so predictable it was almost admirable. "So, in your structure, I would effectively cede control of my restaurant to the Hartwell family?" "You would remain as executive chef and operational director," Victoria countered. "Your day-to-day authority would be unchanged." "Except I would no longer own what I built," I pointed out, "and any future expansion would be under Hartwell control." Victoria's expression remained impassive. "You would be part of the Hartwell family assets. As Daniel's wife, your interests are aligned with ours by definition." The old argument, that marriage to Daniel automatically subsumed my identity into the Hartwell dynasty, was so familiar it almost felt comforting in its predictability. "That's not going to work," I said simply. "Maison remains independent. With me as majority owner, any partnership with Hartwell Properties must respect that fundamental point." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Chen's interest is in the integration of our enterprises. Without that, the entire proposal becomes questionable." "Integration doesn't require absorption," I countered. There are numerous ways to structure a partnership that maintains the independence of both entities while allowing for strategic collaboration. Emma, who had been silently observing until now, spoke up. She's right, Mother, and more importantly, Chen would never agree to this structure. He specifically expressed interest in Amara's leadership at Maison, trying to subsume her restaurant. Into Hartwell Properties would kill the deal entirely. Victoria shot her daughter a look that would have withered a less resilient soul. I've been negotiating business deals since before you were born, Emma. I understand what motivates investors like Chen. Do you? Daniel's quiet question drew everyone's attention. Because from where I'm sitting, you've fundamentally misunderstood what makes this opportunity attractive to him. Victoria's surprise at being challenged by her son was evident in the momentary widening of her eyes. Explain. Daniel leaned forward, his posture suddenly reminiscent of his mother's authoritative bearing. Chen isn't interested in Hartwell. Properties alone. Our company has been struggling for years, with an outdated business model and diminishing returns. What excited him was the possibility of combining our established portfolio with Amara's innovative approach at Maison. He gestured toward me without looking away from his mother. She built something extraordinary from nothing in just 3 years. The waiting list, the critical acclaim, the profit margins. Those are the result of her vision and execution. Trying to subsume that under the Hartwell name would destroy precisely what makes it valuable. The silence that followed his speech was profound. Victoria stared at her son as if seeing him for the first time, not as the dutiful heir she had shaped, but as a business leader with his own perspective. Daniel, she began, a note of warning in her voice. No, Mother, he interrupted with gentle firmness. I've spent too many years trying to mediate between your expectations and reality. The reality is that Hartwell Properties needs this partnership more than Maison does. And any viable agreement must acknowledge Amara's independent ownership and success. The tension in the room was palpable as mother and son engaged in a silent contest of wills. I remained quiet, recognizing that this moment between them had been brewing for years, perhaps decades. Finally, Victoria turned to Mr. Franklin. Do we have an alternative structure prepared? The attorney nodded, extracting another document from his portfolio. Option B establishes a strategic alliance rather than a merged entity. Both companies would remain independent with reciprocal board representation. Chen's investment would be proportionally divided between Hartwell Properties and Maison, according to valuation. And control? I asked. Management structure remains unchanged, Franklin confirmed, though major decisions affecting the alliance would require consensus among all 3 parties. I glanced at Daniel, who gave me a slight nod. This framework, while not perfect, respected the fundamental autonomy I required. That's a starting point I could work with, I acknowledged. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. You understand. This would give you a seat on the Hartwell Properties board? You would have direct influence over a company that has been in this family for generations. Yes, I met her gaze steadily. Just as Daniel would have a seat on Maison's board, we would be equal partners, in business as we should have been in marriage. The pointed statement hung in the air. Emma shifted in her chair, clearly torn. Between discomfort and appreciation for the direct challenge, Victoria turned to Daniel. And you support this arrangement? I do, he replied without hesitation. It's fair, it maintains the integrity of both businesses, and it gives us the best chance of securing Chen's investment. Victoria's fingers drummed once on her desk, the only visible sign of her internal calculations. After a long moment, she nodded briskly. Very well. Mr. Franklin will prepare a detailed term sheet based on this framework. We'll present it to Chen tomorrow morning. The business concluded, an awkward silence fell over the room. Emma stood first. Well, I should get to the office. Mother, I'll call you later about the Montgomery documents. As she passed behind me, she squeezed my shoulder briefly, a small gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed by Victoria. When Emma had gone, Victoria dismissed Franklin with a nod. Once the door closed behind him, she turned to us with a different expression, less the business leader, more the family matriarch. "Now that we've addressed the professional considerations," she said, "there remains the matter of your unorthodox revelation last night, Amara." "Mother," Daniel began, a warning in his voice. Victoria raised a hand. "I'm not starting an argument. I'm simply acknowledging that beyond the business implications, there are family considerations that need to be addressed." "Such as?" I asked cautiously. "Such as the fact that you deliberately concealed your ownership of Maison from your husband for 3 years, and that you chose to reveal this fact in a public setting designed to maximize embarrassment to the family." The accusation was delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty that it momentarily silenced my defense. Before I could formulate a response, Daniel surprised me again. "That's not entirely accurate, Mother," he said quietly. "Amara didn't reveal her ownership to embarrass us. She revealed it because after years of being dismissed and marginalized by this family, by you, she needed to claim her rightful place." Victoria's expression hardened. "I have always treated Amara with appropriate respect." "No," Daniel countered gently. "You've tolerated her presence while consistently undermining her value. You've referred to her career as a little cooking job for years, despite her obvious talent. You excluded her from important family discussions. And just yesterday, you explicitly banned her from a family dinner at her own restaurant." Each point landed with precision, cataloging patterns of behavior that I had long experienced, but that Daniel had never before acknowledged so directly. "I was protecting our family interests," Victoria insisted. "The dinner with Chen was critical to Hartwell Properties' future." "And yet," I interjected, "it was my connection to Chen that actually opened the door to this investment opportunity. The very thing you tried to hide, my professional success, has become the key to saving the family business." Victoria's gaze shifted between us, recognition dawning that the dynamics had fundamentally changed, not just between her and me, but between her and her son. "Daniel has always been loyal to this family," she said finally. "To our legacy and values." "Yes," he agreed. "But I'm beginning to understand that loyalty doesn't mean blind obedience. It means honoring what's truly important about our legacy, the entrepreneurial spirit, the commitment to excellence, while being willing to evolve." He reached over and took my hand, a public declaration of where he stood. "And Amara embodies those values more authentically than anyone I know. She built something extraordinary through vision, hard work, and unwavering standards, the very qualities that made Hartwell Properties successful in the first place." The connection between us, tenuous after last night's revelations, strengthened. With his words. For the first time in our marriage, Daniel was standing unequivocally with me rather than between his mother and me. Victoria observed this shift with the shrewd assessment that had made her formidable in business. After a long moment, she sighed almost imperceptibly. "I suppose I have underestimated you, Amara," she conceded, the words clearly costing her considerable pride. "Your accomplishments with Maison are impressive, and your willingness to consider an alliance with Hartwell Properties despite our differences suggests a commitment to this family I may have failed to recognize." Coming from Victoria, this qualified acknowledgement was the equivalent of an effusive apology from anyone else. I recognized it for the significant concession it represented. "Thank you," I said simply. "I've always wanted to contribute to this family, Victoria, just not at the expense of my own identity and dreams." She nodded once, the closest we would likely come to mutual understanding. "Well then, it seems we have a path forward, professionally at least. The personal matters between you and Daniel are, of course, your own to resolve." It was a graceful exit from emotional territory that clearly made her uncomfortable. Victoria stood, signaling the end of our meeting with the same authority she brought to everything. "I'll expect you both at the presentation to Chen tomorrow, 9 a.m. at the Hartwell offices." As Daniel and I left his mother's house, walking down the garden path toward our car, I felt a curious lightness. Not everything was resolved between Daniel and me, or between me and the Hartwell family, but the truth was finally in the open. Whatever came next would be built on honesty rather than accommodation, on partnership rather than subjugation. Daniel stopped before we reached the car, turning to face me. "I meant what I said in there. About you embodying the values that matter." "I know," I replied. "And I meant what I said about wanting to be part of this family, just not at the cost of disappearing into it." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We have a lot to talk about Maison, about the partnership with Chen, about our marriage." "Yes," I agreed. "But for the first time in years, I feel like we might actually talk about the things that matter. Really talk, without holding back." Daniel smiled then, the genuine smile that had first drawn me to him years ago. "I'd like that. Starting with lunch? I know this amazing restaurant. The chef is supposed to be extraordinary." I laughed, feeling some of the tension of the past 24 hours dissolve. "I might be able to get us a table. I have connections with the owner." As we drove away from Victoria's house, I realized that the revelation that had seemed so catastrophic last night had actually been necessary. Not just for me, but for all of us. Sometimes the most painful truths are the ones that finally set us free. 6 months after the fateful dinner at Maison, I stood in the kitchen of our newest venture, Fusion, a rooftop restaurant crowning the recently renovated Hartwell Tower in downtown Seattle. The space combined soaring glass walls with warm wood accents, offering diners a 360-degree view of the city skyline, Puget Sound, and the Olympic Mountains beyond. My design team had outdone themselves, creating an environment that perfectly balanced modern sophistication with inviting warmth. "The first reservations arrive in 2 hours," Wei reminded me, appearing at my side with his customary quiet efficiency. "The staff is assembled in the dining room for final briefing." I nodded, running my hand along the pristine countertop of the custom-designed chef's table, an intimate dining experience for 8 guests positioned directly alongside the open kitchen. This feature had been my personal insistence during the design phase, a physical manifestation of the transparency I now embraced in both my professional and personal life. "I'll be right there," I promised, just taking it all in for a moment. Wei's expression softened slightly, the closest he came to sentimentality. A significant achievement. The first of many, I expect. As he departed, I allowed myself a moment of private satisfaction. Fusion represented the tangible result of the partnership between Maison, Hartwell Properties, and the Chen Group. The first of 5 planned restaurant concepts that would anchor Hartwell developments across the Pacific Northwest. The venture had progressed with remarkable speed once the framework was established, fueled by Lawrence Chen's capital and connections, Hartwell Properties' development expertise, and my culinary vision. The sound of familiar footsteps interrupted my reverie. Daniel approached, dressed in the architect's uniform of dark jeans and a tailored blazer, a tablet in hand. "Final walkthrough complete," he reported with a smile. "Everything is perfect, just like the woman who designed it." The easy compliment still surprised me sometimes. This new version of Daniel who spoke his mind freely, who had discovered his own voice apart from his mother's expectations. "The south-facing windows?" I asked, referring to a last-minute adjustment we'd debated. "Your instinct was right," he admitted. "The wider frames make all the difference at sunset. The light quality is extraordinary." I smiled, remembering the passionate but respectful disagreement we'd had over that design element, so different from our old pattern of conflict avoidance and silent compromise. "I should get out there for the staff briefing," I said, checking my watch. Is Emma here yet? Just arrived. And she brought the final partnership numbers from last quarter. You'll be pleased. I raised an eyebrow. Spoilers? Daniel grinned. Maison outperformed projections by 22%. Chen is ecstatic. And Victoria? I couldn't help asking. His expression turned wry. Mother is adjusting to her new reality. Having her son's wife outperform the flagship family business was not in her 5-year plan. Is she coming tonight? I kept my tone neutral, though the question was anything but. Front row at the friends and family soft opening. Her words, not mine, were that she wouldn't miss it for the world. Coming from Victoria, this qualified as effusive enthusiasm. Our relationship had evolved over the past 6 months into something resembling mutual respect, if not warmth. The WhatsApp quarterly business meetings inevitably included moments of tension, but they remained professional rather than personal. Progress I once would have considered impossible. Daniel took my hand as we walked toward the dining room. Are you nervous? About the opening? No. About having dinner with your mother afterward? Always. I squeezed his hand. But it's getting easier. The staff stood at attention as we entered the dining room. 50 of Seattle's finest culinary professionals, many poached from other prestigious establishments, others promoted from Maison. Sophia had been elevated to operations director for both restaurants, while Julian maintained his role as the public face of Maison, allowing me to focus on Fusion's launch. Good evening, I began, surveying the assembled team. In 2 hours, we open our doors for the first time. Every person in this room has been specifically chosen because you represent the best in your field. Together, we're creating something extraordinary. Not just a restaurant, but a new standard for dining in Seattle. As I continued the opening night briefing, I caught Daniel watching me from the periphery, his expression a mixture of pride and something deeper. Our marriage had been fundamentally transformed by the revelations 6 months ago. Not destroyed as I had initially feared, but reconstructed on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The weeks following the confrontation at Victoria's home had been difficult. Daniel and I had engaged in painful but necessary conversations about the patterns that had eroded our connection, the compromises that had become capitulations, the silences that had grown into secrets. We'd enlisted a therapist to help navigate the complicated terrain, committing to rebuilding rather than abandoning what we had once cherished. As the staff dispersed to their final preparations, Emma approached, tablet in hand. At her side was Michael Wong, Chen's associate who had become a regular presence in our business dealings, and, more recently, in Emma's personal life, though neither would confirm the rumors of romance. The numbers look fantastic, Emma said, without preamble, handing me the tablet. Chen believes we should accelerate the Portland location timeline. He thinks we're missing a market opportunity. I scanned the quarterly report quickly. Perhaps, but I won't compromise quality for speed. We need the right location and the right team. That's exactly what I told him, Michael interjected with a smile. He expected you'd say that. He also said to tell you he's bringing guests tonight who are interested in discussing Asian expansion opportunities. The casual mention of international expansion, something that would have seemed unimaginable a year ago, no longer surprised me. Chen's vision had always been global, and Fusion's concept was deliberately designed to translate across cultures and markets. As we finished discussing business details, the first text message arrived from an unexpected source. Victoria en route. Brought the 1982 Bordeaux from Richard's collection. He would have wanted it open for this occasion. The reference to Daniel's father and the offering of a prized wine from his cellar represented an olive branch I couldn't have imagined 6 months ago. Victoria would never be warm or demonstrative, but in her own way, she was acknowledging the value I had brought to the family legacy. I showed the message to Daniel, whose eyebrows rose in surprise. That's significant, he said quietly. She hasn't opened anything from Dad's collection since he died. Progress, I acknowledged. Slow but real. As the final preparations accelerated around us, I took a moment to step onto the rooftop terrace that adjoined the dining room. The setting sun painted Seattle in hues of gold and amber, the water of Puget Sound shimmering in the distance. Below, the renovated Hartwell Tower stood as a symbol of the family's revitalized business, modernized, dynamic, no longer relying solely on past prestige. Daniel joined me on the terrace, slipping his arm around my waist. Second thoughts? Not one, I replied truthfully, though I still think about that Sunday dinner sometimes, how different everything might be if your mother hadn't banned me from it. The great irony, Daniel mused. Her attempt to exclude you was the catalyst that forced all of us to finally confront the truth. In a strange way, we should thank her. I laughed. Let's not go that far. But I am grateful for where we've landed. The sound of the service elevator announced the arrival of the first staff members returning to their stations. Our moment of private reflection was ending, reality beckoning us back to the controlled chaos of opening night. Ready? Daniel asked. I took one last look at the view, at the city that had become home, at the business I had built, at the partnership that had transformed not just our professional lives, but our personal ones as well. Ready, I confirmed. As we turned to re-enter the restaurant, my phone chimed with another message. This one from Wei. Victoria Hartwell has arrived early. She is asking to see the kitchen. Daniel and I exchanged glances, a silent communication that had become our strength rather than our weakness. Together? He asked. Together, I agreed. We walked hand in hand back into Fusion, where Victoria Hartwell waited to be welcomed into the restaurant owned by her daughter-in-law, the chef she had once tried to exclude, the woman who had found her place at the table, the partner who had helped save the family legacy while creating her own, the woman who had turned exclusion into opportunity, secrets into strength, and a banned family dinner into the beginning of something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.